Hello, friends. Susan Axelrod here, the Confidence Coach. I am delighted to be here today to bring you another honest, direct conversation with my dear friend and colleague, Nadine Searle, the Calmer Self Coach. Over the last few years, Nadine and I have developed a program that we call How to Live a Confident and Calm Life. Both of us use Qigong, so often Qigong comes up in our conversations, but mostly we share our personal experiences, our own truths, so that others can see that you can be vulnerable, you can share, you can speak, you can voice, you can release, and move through these things to get to another side. Today, you might hear us talking about the other side of cancer with my friend Nadine. And I will be sharing what it feels like to be on the other side of grief and loss. Friends, I want to invite you to sit back, grab a pen and pad, and enjoy this personal conversation. Hello, my dear friend Nadine.
Hello, Susan. It's so lovely to be here, ready for another one of our beautiful conversations. Thank you for inviting me.
It's such a pleasure to speak with you. I'm coming here live from Arizona. You're coming live from England. We have these conversations, and I want to tell you something, Nadine. It's not infrequent that I am walking my dog and I pull up one of our very own conversations, which are available on my YouTube channel and your YouTube channel, to listen to what's coming out of our mouths. Our conversations are never scripted. They always stem from some kind of personal interaction that we've had, some kind of personal voice messaging that we do back and forth. And then one or the other of us says, wow, that would make a really good conversation, right?
Yeah. Yes, I love that. The way that we communicate with each other across the miles is beautiful, isn't it? And you're absolutely right. How often do we say, we need to share this? What we're saying is important, it's valuable. And we know, don't we, because we get that feedback from people that other people benefit from us sharing our truth, being so open and vulnerable, which, as I'm working on, and these conversations and what we say together. We're helping each other, aren't we, with our conversations in a private way, but then when we share them, we know we're helping so many others, and that's a wonderful thing for us to be able to do, isn't it? So, thank you for inviting me to do this with you because it is a real blessing. Thank you.
It's such a blessing. So I have my pen and paper, all ready to go. As you know, I take copious notes myself from
Yeah.
our conversation because, as you said, I learn as we go along. The title for today's conversation is this: Is it okay to cry from what you've been through? And I want to invite you to share the story of our conversation about how we sort of came to this topic today.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, this has stemmed, hasn't it, from a message that I got from you where your emotion was out there and you reached out to me, which I'm truly blessed that you did, in this way that we communicate. It's not instant, is it? You weren't phoning me and I was there to talk to you. You just sent the message. You knew that I was there for you, knew I'd hear you, and then I got back to you. But your message was so honest and so deep and moved me so much because your emotion was there, the tears were there, you were talking through your tears, and we both know that's okay and that is fine. And the fact that you thought to share it with me in that moment, which the honest truth is I probably wouldn't have done, I probably would have gone, oh, pull yourself together, then get in touch maybe. But that is my upbringing, that kind of thing. And this is something I think, it's good to discuss as well. We sometimes feel it's not okay to cry. Like I just said, I would not have got in touch with you while I was in the tears. What's that all about? Not really sure. but I would like to think that I would and evolve into that. You could do that, and that is a great, wonderful thing that you could do. And again, that is really, if the way that you've evolved and the way that you're more comfortable with yourself than maybe I am, and maybe a lot of other people are, that you can do that, and knowing that you can share that with me. Because again, some people wouldn't do that as a message or get in touch because they would be frightened of upsetting someone else. We don't cry sometimes because we don't want to upset other people. That
Also,
wasn't in your mind or your heart at all, was it? That is, you were absolutely right. Ring up, get in touch, whatever, while you're in that moment, while you are feeling that pain and sharing it. And that is the beauty of it, isn't it? And the total, it's almost childlike, isn't it? Just to go, I'm hurting, I'm bad, what can I do? I can do something. And in that moment, I really do believe, and I know, that you got some relief from that just by sending that message. As I say, I wasn't there to talk back to you, I wasn't there to give you a hug, it was none of that, but sharing was good for you in that moment. As soon as I heard it, it's like, I was moved. I was then in tears because it moved my emotions. And, this wonderful title that you've given this conversation, Is It Okay to Cry from What You've Been Through? Yes, it certainly is, isn't it? And share it. Really share it. That's the other thing, isn't it? So this is what stemmed it, isn't it? Your beautiful message. And I'm so glad that you did that.
yeah. It is indeed okay to cry from what you've been through. And to be even more clear, I was sobbing. I was sobbing in an uncontrolled way. And exactly what you've just said, and I hope people really will take to heart what you've said, that I was just as if I was speaking to you and I knew that you were there. When you said it there, I put a comment at exactly what you said. You knew I was there for you. And so when we are feeling sadness, fear, grief, loss, abiding anger, resentment, betrayal, these kind of deep feelings, tears often are a result of that. And most people just really kind of want to cry on their own. Also perfectly fine. No one is saying that you should do anything at all. We're just sharing here how it felt for me to. I could think of another time, Nadine. My father was in the dying process, and I was walking in the same exact preserve, as a matter of fact, when I messaged you a few years later, recently. And I called my friend Debbie, and I can feel the energy, the muscle memory of that same conversation with her when I said, I was telling her that I was on this 10-week process of the death process with my father from natural causes. And my sister was there and my mother was there. And I was saying to Debbie, I can't do this with my mother. I can't do this with my mother. And I was sobbing I was sobbing uncontrolled. And she was there for me then. And I haven't talked to her about that call in a long time. I think I will, but I remember she said, we don't have to worry about that now, because my mother was perfectly fine and healthy. Yeah.
But beautiful, isn't it nice for someone, so we don't have to worry about that now? What a lovely response, because we need that kind of. It is a bit of permission, isn't it? It's also a little bit of, going keep the focus almost, isn't it? Because I don't know about you, Susan, and I'm sure other people can relate. There is a way. I have a tendency, and definitely I used to be, when the emotions come, I try and deflect.
Yes,
I'm not going there. Yes. I will think of something else. How many people, push their fingernails into their palms to stop themselves crying, and that we learn these tactics, don't we? Very young sometimes, to go, stop, because we're sort of taught that, aren't we? I don't know if you were, but I definitely was. Don't cry. It's not the time. It's not the place. It's not appropriate. So you get this inbuilt almost, don't you? That don't do it. So to have that kind of permission, we don't have to worry about that now. We just focus on what you're going through, whatever, So we have both learnt to change that, haven't we? Even if you had that to start start with, I don't know. But I definitely did. And I know I had 13 years teaching young children. And one of the things, so many people would say, don't cry, it's all right. The hug, like I just said to you, I wasn't there to give you a hug. The hug was always just go, don't cry. And actually, if I was to have hugged you in that moment, I would have been cry, cry, cry. To let it out. So it's different, isn't it? And again, just looking at I know where my reserve came from. I am English as well. There is that. But that kind of don't cry, as if there's something wrong with it. And I believed that. It's maybe weak to cry or whatever. But actually, I think it's a strength to be able to show your tears. And also, as I say, when you shared that with me, being impressed is not the word, but as I say, I was honoured that you wanted to share that with me. But I was impressed, actually. I was almost like, you can do this. You're an inspiration to me in the way that you are more comfortable with your emotions than I am. And I take that lead almost. I go, yes, Susan can do it. I can do it. And I love that. I love that. We can do that. So letting the tears come, being okay with that in the moment, is very powerful. And I know it's something we both understand, what a release it is. Tears are a release. And we need that. To hold it in is damaging. And when I was holding my emotions in, it was bad for me. It was bad for my health. It wasn't good at all. So that's another angle on it, isn't it? Let it out. Let it out. Don't hold it in. It's going to come out sometime anyway.
Yeah, it's going to sometime in some way.
Yeah.
And that is without a doubt. It is true that when we're younger, we hear don't cry. And as we get older, we become more stoic in that way, where we have to manage our feelings and all of that. The topic today has a second half, and that is from what you've been through. So I want to acknowledge, Nadine, that we're 1 year. It's about a year since you received your cancer diagnosis. And I just crossed over the 1 year of losing my husband after a difficult personal situation, a deep loss that occurred over a few years' time. And so, another part of this that I really want to speak about today is so absolutely important, and not just for women, for men, for everyone. And that is validating that what you've been through is hard. Validating really on a deep personal level. For me, it's about to your soul, validating to your soul, this is hard. What I'm going through or what I've been through. Nadine, in the green room before we got started, full reveal, we were talking about your hair, as has come up before. And even to the point of you previously having the most iconic head of hair that every woman in the universe envied. And yet that is now gone. At this time, hair grows back, of course, as we already see.
Yeah.
But all these things, we were talking about how deep the loss of hair was. I'd love for you to share some of that, because that is part of what you've been through as well.
Yeah, you're so right, and it's a topic, and I laughed as soon as you said it, but making light of it. But it's so symbolic. It's out there. I couldn't hide what I was going through because my hair was giving it away. That was one of my fears. Oh my goodness, if I have chemotherapy, scared of that, full stop. But then I'm going to lose my hair. I was really scared of that, because that is an unknown. I've got a certain amount of vanity, obviously. Like you said, I had long hair. It was one of my things, I suppose. I don't know, and that was going to be ripped away from me. And that happened, and that was hard. But like you say, and going back to the wonderful title, is it okay to cry from what you've been through? Who would argue with that? If you lose your hair, is it okay to cry? Of course it is. But I didn't cry when I lost it. I'm crying now more as it's coming back. Again, that delayed. I I was in shock, I think, at the start, definitely with my diagnosis, in a bit of denial. I was doing my coping strategies in a way, you know, and I didn't feel so sad at the start. I'm feeling that sadness more as time is going on. And ironically, because it's coming back, is making me feel more about what I lost. Bit strange, and I'm probably not explaining that very well, but that the emotions, and this is something I think again to recognize, isn't it? I love that you said validate how hard this is, because I could make light of it. I laughed when you said it, but that's not making light of it. But it is hard. It's bloody hard to lose your hair and to be vulnerable. I chose not to wear a wig. I chose to just brave it out and go through it. I wanted that challenge for myself. And I was lucky that, you know, I got met favourably with everybody saying wonderful things. I didn't feel uncomfortable with no hair or even short hair. But there's a bit of me going, oh, it's really weird. I don't recognise myself. So I'm feeling more feelings now that it's starting to grow back. And I don't recognise myself. And there's a bit of, like you say, the tears come for lots of reasons. Of course, there's sadness and loss. That's an obvious one. But there's also anger and frustration and fear and uncertainty. And the tears are coming for all of those reasons. You know, I can look at myself and go, oh, this isn't what I wanted. This is, like you said earlier, about the future. I think when we were talking before we came live, weren't we? You know, my future is uncertain. My past, all the things that I was planning, all the things that I thought, well, you know, my hair was a given, you know, to use that again as an example. And it's all been taken away, and now I'm coming back, and it's so good. Without a doubt, you know, there's tears of joy as well because it's coming back. You know, that's really lovely. So tears for so many reasons. But like you say, validating that, recognizing it, honoring it, giving myself that time and that space and that permission to go, you know, I will cry whenever it comes up, whatever happens, and it comes up at the most ridiculous times. And I just think that not at the obvious times sometimes, you know, I think, as I say, it didn't, when I actually had my head shaved, the iconic, which I did film it while it was being done, no tears at all. But now I can cry much more about it now than I did then. So it is strange, isn't it, how it comes?
Yes. We were talking about this idea that when you receive, in your case, when you receive a cancer diagnosis, some kind of diagnosis like this, the first experience is shock, and there's basically no expression. You know, there's just this experience of shock that the duration of which is different depending on your personal circumstances. If you get through the shock, some people don't, but if you get through the shock, then you're sort of in this traumatic space, this trauma response of all the fear. You said, I wrote it down, you said, I was scared of chemo, full stop there, like full stop. For you, I knew about that. We even had talked about that even before your own diagnosis. And so there was that massive fear there. You're in complete trauma, not really in charge of the autonomic nervous system, which is very out of whack. It's very out of whack. So you're constantly in what's called the sympathetic, which is the fight, flight, or freeze. You're a little bit frozen. You know, maybe you're in fight all the time. Then as you go through, days pass, the calendar day changes day by day by day, week by week, month by month, and you have an experience. That's all I'm going to say about that, because I haven't had that experience, but you have an experience. And as you've indicated to us here today, you know, up and down, but even now you're crying more from what you've been through. And in part because you're here, and you may be seeing yourself through to the other side of cancer. There's this processing, and then following processing is integration. It's integration. And so once you're in that, and that story, Nadine, that I just spoke through, in part from your coming here, sharing with us, freely in all of our conversations, as well as my personal conversations with you, that process is the same of me and my grief loss from the death of my husband.
Yes.
So even though it was a
Yes.
different situation, I entered a grief journey, a grieving journey with the intention to move through to healing. And I often, not would it say often, I don't know what often is, but I find myself crying. To tell you the truth, it just happened yesterday.
Yes.
And I'll tell you about that in a second. But um, then the releasing of the crying at this time from what you've been through would also, I say again, Nadine, be a validation to self and soul.
Yeah.
I've been through a lot, right?
Mm, mm. Yes, and I think that's so important to recognize, isn't it? Because when I do let myself cry, it's all of the sadness can come up. Every little bit of it can come up, and it's like, and just go, yeah, it's okay to do this. This is important. This is valuable. Of course I'm going to be crying. Why wouldn't I? Because of what I've been through and everything. And like you say, at the start, I was in that shock and I was in denial and all kinds of things, and gripped in that fear. And now the fear has lessened because I've faced those fears. There's still fear, obviously, and panic and stuff for going forward. But it is that kind of, yes, it is okay to cry. Of course it is, with what I've been through, what I'm going through, what we're going through. You in your different way, but it's the same. Of course it is. And where, as I say, that tendency sometimes say, oh, don't cry. Why would you say don't cry? Why would you? Of course, cry. Why wouldn't you cry? It's that kind of thing, isn't it? And like you say, all of the emotions, the frustration. I can cry from frustration. I can cry from anger so much, because and for me, I always say it's like, it feels to me, I cry from the lovely things. I cry from the wonderful messages I get from people. That's crying with love and joy and feeling so. And I always say it's like my heart fills up and then it overflows and the tears come. So that release, because my heart is full, so there's release. So that's sort of the lovely part of tears, isn't it? But I really do feel, it's every emotion going that tears can come from. And to sit there, like you say, with it and go, yeah, why wouldn't I be crying? Why wouldn't I feel that sadness or loss or anger, for whatever feeling that's bringing out those tears? And it does feel it is a release. It's a physical release without a doubt, but you feel it in your heart as well, don't you? Your heart softens or whatever. When you're frozen in fear, the tears will actually change that, because it's movement as well, isn't it? There's things going on in your body and what have to produce the tears, the practical side of it. It is such a release. It's the same. And I've said this before to you and everything, shouting out loud as well really works, doesn't it? It's similar.
Yeah.
It's getting things moving, isn't it? Getting things
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that.
I love what you just said about the movement, because what we know is that it takes some kind of movement to move from that sympathetic nervous system, which is fight,
Yeah.
flight, or freeze, to what we call the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest, digest, and restore. It's the restorative. And so it's virtually impossible to move from one to the other without some kind of movement. And the movement often is breathing. We know that if we take that breath in and let that breath out, but when you cry, you're also breathing. You can't cry and not breathe. And especially if you're sobbing, the way I could feel the memory of those two particular conversations, I can feel myself walking in that nature preserve, like kind of gasping a little bit, between my sobs. And Nadine, one of the things we also have spoken about would be the resilience. Resilience is an interesting topic, and it's very, very deep. We're in the soul space. Resilience to me sometimes is mental and what I call above the surface. But the resilience that we're in, that we commit to, in part by having these honest, open, vulnerable conversations coming from a place of truth to share with others, so that it's known that it's okay to be vulnerable, to experience your soul emotions. But I would like to talk about resilience from the soul space, not just resilience from the mental space where you can get through and move on, but the soul strength that comes from the resilience of facing these traumas and calling them out. As I became a trauma-informed professional coach, I know you became a grief coach as well in your certification. In my training for my TIPC, I took that. I went for it and took it when I heard from the person who is a medical doctor who created that particular certification that all people suffer trauma. And I had heard her speak, and I was like, that's interesting. What do you mean? I thought trauma was trauma, a special thing, a different thing that for only certain people. But in my work as a coach, I had this experience repeatedly with clients. Wow, this feels traumatic. This feels traumatic. And that's why I got my certification to become trauma informed. And that's really underlying what we're talking about, soul resilience from traumatic experiences that every person has, right?
Yes, you're so right there. It is so important, like you say, to validate, to recognize, that this, putting a label on it, if you like, that might sound over dramatic, but it's trauma. It is trauma. And what we're going through, how it affects our body physically, how it affects our mind, our heart, and our soul. It's PTSD that we get, isn't it? We are going through massive trauma. And I think people underplay that. People don't recognize that enough. And to actually go, yes, this is traumatic. It's that deep and that serious. But with that recognition and honouring, accepting, comes the resilience, I feel. As I said earlier, and I can't say it enough, I had to face my biggest fears with this diagnosis and the treatment and the side effects. And now I feel resilient because I faced them. I'm not over my fears. I'm not over that kind of thing. There's going to be new ones to come. But I feel, that's given me that resilience to go, okay, almost like, yeah, bring it on. I've got that strength from it. And you must have had the same, going through something that you feared. I don't know, the term that I've learned with my grief counselling is anticipatory grief. You must have been going through that, before you had your loss, tears probably came then as well because you're anticipating that coming. And again, that's something we can all go through, that is wrapped up in fear as well, isn't it? We're scared of what's going to happen and we're sad before it happens, aren't we? So it happened. But again, when you're facing that, did you feel the same, well, actually, I'm stronger because of it? Did you feel the resilience is building?
I remember when you were getting your certification and you mentioned anticipatory grief the first time, and I was like, wow, that's so big. I know you learned about that then, and we've talked about it since. And it's such an important thing to understand. First, I just want to say the loss I experienced was the loss of something I had. I didn't expect the death in the end. I guess that's part of this. What happened was that I didn't expect the death. I, in fact, expected wellness. And so then after that, like I said, I went on the most intentional journey through grief coaching and therapy, both at the same time with two different people, and an intentional climb back up from that place. So yes, to answer your question, I really do say soul resilience because my work, of course, is deep in the soul space. And when you get through to the other side of something of these magnitudes that we're talking, but magnitude is a relative term, your loss, your trauma is yours.
Yeah.
And but when you get through something to the other side, and then you sit there, sometimes I do, Nadine, I sit here in, this place that I buy, and I sit here alone sometimes and say to myself, you freaking did this. Like, you're here, you're through the most difficult thing you couldn't have even imagined. And yet you're breathing, you're eating, you're working, obviously writing, and I have good personal agency. And that resilience is literally what makes us feel like warriors. When you understand that level of soul resilience, right? This is not mental. This is not even just emotional. This is a soul experience, as you've described to us. And I think this conversation about the loss of the hair, the fear of the chemo, I do want to get a little bit more into this idea of, for you and for me also, looking ahead, what now? But when you get through these things and you find yourself alive and upright on the other side of these episodes, that truly is soul resilience.
Yes. Yeah. I can't echo that enough. It certainly is. There's a little bit of me that actually, no, it's not a little bit, a big bit of me that goes, I'm grateful for this experience. Wouldn't wish it on anybody. Same with you. We don't wish loss on people and bereavement and everything. But actually, when you do recognize that, like you said, I'm still here, I'm moving forward, you especially working so hard, achieving so much, and everything. I'm just getting through every day, but that's an achievement, that you can really recognize, can't you, and be proud of yourself. And this is the moment, and again, that makes me cry, because I go, oh my God, I've done it. The simplest little things I can go. I'll tell you a little story very quickly. I had, when I was really bad with the first lot of chemo that I had, my taste was bad, and my mouth was so sore, everything was bad, and I had some cheese on toast one day. Very simple, bit of cheese on toast, and I took a bite and I just cried. Because it was so simple, making me emotional now. It was so simple, but I could do it. I could bite a bit of toast, I could taste a little bit. It wasn't the right taste, but fine. The tears, I wasn't expecting to cry at that point. It made me laugh as well, and relief. Oh my goodness, I can eat, that kind of thing. And again, sounds very, very little, a very little thing, but very big for me, and again, that came out of nowhere. The tears just came out of nowhere, So again, and you must have found that, the simplest little things will make a memory tick on, maybe, and then the tears will come and the emotions just well up, and it's big, isn't it? Yeah.
It's interesting. We have these two different kinds of experiences, the loss and the grief. So the answer for me, in my way, is yes. To tell you the truth, Nadine, I have said it to my daughter, my one daughter. Other people don't understand how, for us, it's just our experience, but I feel sometimes something will happen, and I will be reminded of my husband and my former life, and it will absolutely come over me. My life. I could start telling many examples, but I won't get into it. But yes, it definitely happens that small things really do affect me very deeply, whereas somebody else is completely clueless to the fact. Like one time I was driving back in my home area, and we passed the exit to my house, my home, my life that I lived in for 30 years. And I was just driving by it, and I had this huge internal upheaval, because that was no longer my home from all of my circumstances and experiences. And so this is where this idea of humanity. I just call this being in humanity, Nadine, being in humanity, where every human, you listening, you viewing, you in our experience, look through a lens of love at another human, because you have no idea. They look normal to you, right? But you have no idea what the human soul experience is that's going on under the surface.
Yeah.
And so that, then moving from there, I do actively in my mind create thoughts that say, I did this. I can't believe it, but I did this. I have gotten, I got through that and that and that and that, and I'm here.
Yeah.
And I always, sort of do look ahead and say what's intended for me. And so I absolutely, in this case, do want to go back up to the mind with the thoughts that we create. When you told that story about being able to eat a piece of toast, I have told you my sister-in-law had cancer. Thank God,
Yes.
she's
Yeah.
perfectly well now. And I remember seeing her mouth in that condition that you described, the sores. And so when you told me that, I really know
You knew. Yeah.
That you were speaking. I think that the soul resilience from underlying trauma is something that I really want to, emphasize in this conversation today, so that we others here, you have been through your personally devastating experience, and I have been through my personally devastating experience. And yeah, sure, they do define us. They surely do define us. And yet here we are today, at another time, in another place, together, speaking it out loud, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's so right, isn't it? Because it is that sharing that for everyone else to sort of go, yeah, it is okay. And yeah, we don't know what's coming in our future. We don't know how we're going to cope with it and everything, but we are going to. I'm sure you're the same as I am, confident in going, the resilience is there in us. We have built that up in ourselves to go, yeah, we got through this, we'll get through whatever else there is. And I am grateful for that, that confidence that I have in myself to go, I'll cope, and I'm sure you feel the same. I know you'll cope with whatever life throws at you next, and I'm sure you feel the same about me. And that is a blessing, isn't it, to have that, because we can be frozen in fear, can't we, so much? And that quite often is why we have sometimes just fear of our own emotions. I used to sometimes be in a position where I thought, I'm not going to do something or say something because I was scared of crying, scared of my emotions. I'm not going to have those emotions, so I won't do that. And I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but I know I used to stop myself from, especially saying things, and sometimes saying things that were very deep and meaningful and loving and caring, that I would stop myself doing that because I thought if I say that, I'll cry. So I wouldn't say it. And I look back at that and think, what a shame. I still have that now, but I know now, like the start of this, your message to me where you were openly sobbing, you didn't have that thought, I won't do it because I'm crying.
Right.
Now, I would have done, I would have stopped myself doing that. So I would have been really, I think it's quite damaging to myself to not be freeing those emotions and to be pushing them down and not going there. So, and now I know that, going through that, welcoming those emotions, however painful it is, and sometimes crying is painful. Like you said, that sobbing, you have that comes from your stomach sometimes, doesn't it? And that literal, not pretty crying, that kind of thing, really, really, it can hurt, can't it?
Right.
So physical as well as emotional, it really, really can hurt. And I think it's just to not be scared of that anymore is a relief, isn't it? And I'm so grateful for that. I still have moments when I'm almost called myself, censor myself, but then I remember and I go, no, I can do this. And it's that kind of, and again, that when you do that, then feeling, please proud of yourself is so important as well. And again, that's another emotion that I never was comfortable with. So, I mean, does that resonate with you a little bit? Do you feel that?
Oh, definitely. When you get through these difficult traumatic experiences, and you can, move through and realize that you can come out to the other side, even from extreme grief, from extreme loss, from traumatic change. And but as I said, Nadine, the sun is going to rise, whether you like it or not. It's going to set, and it's going to rise, and it's going to set and rise again. And then in the end, it's up to us to understand that we create the thoughts we think, that our emotions are a result of the thoughts we think, the way we feel. And then our behavior is a result of the emotional experience. And for people who are listening to us today, viewing this perhaps, I'm really delighted to be able to say, in the end, we can be in the control of that. And that is absolutely the most important thing, not to control in the way that you said, where you stop yourself from feeling, from expressing, from emoting, but rather where you allow it to come up, you honor it, you claim it, and then move through it to the other side, and know resiliently that your soul can survive these things. Nadine, one of the things that we had also talked about was this idea of sometimes we get angry in loss. Sometimes we get angry in loss. There's all kinds of reasons. If somebody dies in whatever way, we can feel betrayed. We can feel resentful. We can feel anger at the loss of the loved one. In your case, when it's an illness, all the emotions that you have shared with us, the expression of which, are 100% real, anger at the loss of all the things. And in the end, what you have expressed to us by saying it's not good for you to stuff down, depress down that emotion and have it sitting, suffering inside your physical body, which leads to a different emotional experience. Then if we come from a place of love, if we can see through a lens of love, if we can use the filter of love, then this will support us. So let me just speak for one more minute on this, Nadine, and say, when you're in the shock, when you're in the trauma, when you're in the traumatic experiences, you're simply resonating, it's just total resonance, it's just total resonance of emotion reacting. As we work through this processing, through listening to discussions like this, through understanding there could be a different way of being, and we work to integrate even these deep, abiding losses, then the place that we want to go to is love. So in your example, you even went so far as to say that beautiful head of hair, now today, looking back, you could see, wow, was that actually a cover for me? Was that a cover for me to cover myself in various ways? And you said that to me before, and that expression would be because you love yourself more now, that you even see that. You know what I mean, or not really?
No, I really do, actually. And it's so interesting that you say it that way, because it just helps me feel it more, actually, because and this is part of my process, in such a strange way, learning to love myself the way I am now, and recognizing that I didn't really love myself before. So although, again, coming back to there, because it's an easy way to say it as an example, isn't it? The hair that was so long and full of whatever it was, that was me, and that I'd say I loved so much. I didn't. I always moaned about my hair, but it was there and I thought I loved it. Now it's gone. Now I've got something that I'm not sure about and everything, but I'm learning to love it. And this is one of the lessons for me, and I'm grateful for that, because I'm learning now to love myself in a way that I couldn't before. This is the process. This is the soul resilience, isn't it? You know, the change that I'm going through. And for that, I am grateful. As I say, I didn't choose it. I've had all that anger, frustration, resentment, fear, but it is there, and it is just taking a step back, if you like, and just going, yeah, you know, this is what it is. I have that resilience in me deep down. If I let my emotions come up, work through them, like you say, you know, this is the realization that we can come to, isn't it? And I am grateful for that. And you know, you use this term, you've used it before with me, you know, turning from the loss into love, and you just described it so beautifully. You know, if we can open up to the love, and this is what I hope I'm trying to describe, to learn it. I'm learning now to love myself in a way that I never thought, I never expected. I never knew this was going to happen. I never knew, you know, but it's a different way. And obviously, well, not obviously, I don't think I could love myself before. I was trying a way that I thought was good for me. This is a different experience, and I'm working through that as well. So as I say, I'm probably rambling on and it's not making a lot of sense,
No,
but
it's making total sense.
oh, well,
And
I'm glad. And I hope people will take that. You know, we don't know how things are going to play out, but we can turn all of our the loss, frustration, anger, fear, all of that, we can turn it into love. And love does give you that. It's a wonderful place to be, isn't it? You know, it does change. You know, you can change fear into love, you can change loss into love, you can change frustration into love, you can change anger into love. As I'm saying that, people might be going, yeah, easy to say. I would have been like that before. Yeah, how do you do that? I've got no clue. But the life experiences that we are both going through at the moment are giving us that, aren't they? I mean, do you feel the same with what you're going through? You're able to do it more, you're finding another way?
yes, and one of the ways is through my thesis, Dear Future Self.
Yes, yes,
My fourth book is titled Dear Future Self, but my third book is titled Dear Younger Self.
yeah,
And the thesis that I work on in my coaching is these are conversations that we can have with our younger selves to love her or him
mm,
more and say, you couldn't know, you did the best you could.
yeah,
And that we can now in a meditative state go back to our younger selves and say, you're going to be okay. You know, we're here, we're upright, we're breathing. Today, Nadine, at this moment on this day, you're here with us. I just can't even describe how amazing it is to be speaking with you about this. When 1 year ago, your younger self was in shock and
mm,
terror of the chemo and death and dying. You know, in
yeah,
the beginning, when you get a diagnosis, you don't know what is going to happen, and you can't help but, you know, go to that place. And
yeah,
so the younger self was there. And but my other part of the thesis that is the most soothing and the most amazing, I'm so glad that we got to this today, is
yeah,
the Dear Future Self thesis.
yes,
So
yes,
in the very experience, for you in your experience, for me in my experience, 1 year ago today, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, for me, I couldn't look ahead and have imagined that I would be here. You
mm,
know, 1 year ago, my husband died,
mm,
and I was in shock and trauma and all of that. And it had already been a difficult experience for the
yeah,
prior few years.
yeah,
And yet here I am. And so now the idea of looking ahead a little bit does not mean that you're not present. In
mm,
fact, it is
yeah,
from the present moment of strength and the soul resilience of being in charge of your thoughts, but knowing that you can get through this deep seated grief.
yeah,
Again, ours are different in different ways,
mm,
loss,
mm,
same different in different ways.
mm,
And right here and now, Nadine, I guess as a result of this, I would love us both to do a little writing on the dear future self, because one of the things we were talking about before was, for both of us in different ways, we look ahead now and say, what does the next year bring, or the rest of my life bring?
Yeah.
But here we are today in the fullest expression of the dear younger self thesis and dear future self thesis. Do you understand? Can you feel that?
Yes, I love that, because it is, you're absolutely right. We're both familiar, aren't we? And I'm sure a lot of people that will listen or watch this will be familiar with the inner child work, and how going back to your childhood and reassuring yourself and comforting yourself and healing yourself is so powerful. But you just said it perfectly, and it just had a light bulb moment for me. Go back to myself just a year ago and go, it's okay. We got through this. We're
Mm.
okay. And that is a great, just as you said it, I got that real feeling of comfort and going, oh yeah, I probably am doing that in a strange way, but you just said it out loud and made me really feel it. Yes, I can do that. And that is exactly what you're just saying, isn't it? I can then look, I have that soul resilience to look forward a bit more. What can I be looking forward to in my next year, my dear future self, and then, like you say, my dear younger self can be comforted and held and healed through this as well. It's just wonderful. It's that whole full circle, isn't it, of what we can give ourselves, isn't it? And I really love that. And I think you have this wonderful term that you say, grief visits, and it is, I can allow myself to feel that grief, and I know it's a visit, I know it's okay, I know it passes, that kind of thing, but I also know, and this is what you're reminding me today, is that actually it will make me stronger. It will make my past, my younger self, and my future self better. And that's such a comfort, isn't it, to know, grief visits, however we want to look at it, whatever emotion, but grief visits I love, and to allow, and to get, and I even go to the extent, and this, Susan, I give myself what I call wallow days, because I know how healing and how powerful that grief is, but sometimes it is to give myself that time to do it, and space, and sometimes privacy, to do that as well. It's so powerful, isn't it, to choose to have it, and it is, that might sound ridiculous to some people, but I would encourage everyone to try it. Listen to a song that makes you cry, watch a film that makes you cry, give yourself that space, that time, that permission to have that grief visit, if you like. And I know that's not the only way that you say it, but just to allow that in, and then at the end of that, see how you feel and see what it goes. You do get so much from it, don't you? So I really do love it. And yes, I will do that. I'll do a little bit of writing for my dear future self. Thank you.
Yeah, I also will do that. And I want to acknowledge my dear friend Deb taught me grief visits, because she's a little bit older than I am, and she had losses before I did, and had a deep experience with grief. And later, in more recent years now, I've had plenty of losses myself. And but I really processed and integrated that in such a way that when you're in the beginning of traumatic grief of whatever sort, however it finds you, Nadine, I believe that we are in humanity today. I do believe we are experiencing a universal grief. I do believe we are experiencing a universal betrayal. And so for anyone who's listening, if you have light in you, if you are a light worker, if you are a soul connected person, if you're a healer, I can't encourage you enough to do all the things to get even healthier, even more well, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, because I do believe the universal grief is a little bit of a pall right now. It's creating some energy. And that's why I'm so happy for the two of us to come together, to have these conversations, to open up about the reality and the truth. When you are hit by grief, or shock or loss, trauma, a diagnosis, whatever it is, in the beginning, it's all hard. It's all traumatic. The calendar day is going to pass. Another day is going to pass. A week is going to pass. months are going to pass. And in this conversation, which I hope people will listen to again and again and take notes even deeper and deeper for themselves, that it is possible to achieve healing. Healing doesn't mean that you forget, Nadine, you'll never forget the impact of the trauma of your diagnosis and the trauma of chemotherapy, and then you had radiation and all the things. You're still in your treatment program. But it's how we think about it, it's how we remember and how we process through these emotions, these experiences that get us through to the other side. And also what's coming up so strongly for me, Nadine, is the soul experience. The soul wants to be healed. The soul wants to be healthy and well. The most traumatic losses of people who lose their children, every loss, some of them you can't even imagine how you could get through. But time is going to pass. You are going to continue to exist. And through the breath, through the breath and through your intellectually, mentally understanding the kinds of concepts that we've discussed today, and through the emotional experience that you permit yourself, then your soul can sort of glide along as needed for a while through the most difficult of times. And then there's, soul healing work that you can do along the lines that we've discussed today. I mean, Nadine, I once again, there's so much more to say, but I think that we've come to the end of our time.
There always is, and we can talk forever. But I think what you said there earlier was so important for people to recognise. We're talking about our personal experience, you with bereavement, me with the cancer diagnosis and going through treatment. But actually, you're so right. There is universal grief at the moment. This is everyone I talk to is going through something. There is a lot going on. The world is in a strange place. I don't know what it's all about, but everyone's feeling something. This has been a tough year. We're coming to the end of the year. It's been tough for everybody. So this is really relevant for everybody, isn't it? Whatever way you want to relate to it, how we recognize our feelings, how we let ourselves, like you say, for what we've been through. Everyone's going through something, like you say. We are allowed to cry. It is okay, to feel those feelings and to put that out. Like you said, listen to this, make notes, take from it. We have just covered so much, and there is we listen again, don't we, to our conversations, and we get something else from it. So I would encourage everybody to do that. Take some time, listen. This is for everybody, isn't it? Whatever we're going through, this is for everybody.
I want to let our listeners and viewers know that there are two other podcasts that I want to recommend. One is I think it's a 20-part series that Nadine Searle did with the inimitable Cornelia Stephanie on the inner child. And we will put a link to that podcast. Amazing conversations about the inner child, which is, if we don't acknowledge the inner child, if we don't start there, then it's hard to grow from, here up. And the other podcast, not coincidentally, is one that I did with Cornelia Stephanie, which is Living Beyond the Core Wounds, about emotional processing. We met through Cornelia. She is a force to be reckoned with. And so we're going to make links to both of those podcasts on, our YouTube channels. Nadine, as always,
they're so relevant,
thank you so much. It's so good. And I will look forward to our next conversation. It won't be too long before that happens, I know.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Susan. This has been so valuable as always. Thank you.
Take good care, and I'll see you soon.